Okay, so officially, hello and welcome everyone to today's session of the MZES Social Science Data Lab. My name is Dennis Cohen, and I am happy to welcome you to today's talk by Stefan Jünger on the analysis and management of georeferenced survey data. Our event series, the Social Science Data Lab, takes place at the Mannheim Center for European Social Research, and we provide a platform for tools and methods for the collection, management, analysis, and visualization of social science data. The Social Science Data Lab is organized by myself in collaboration with my colleagues Cosima Meyer and Julian Bernauer with the support of our student assistant Nick Baumann. Our speaker today is Stefan Jünger, who is a postdoctoral researcher at GIS Cologne, where he provides services in the area of geocoding, georeferencing, and spatial linking. He's also the head of the GIS Secure Data Center. In his talk today, Stefan will talk about the connection of social science survey data with Geographic Information System data, and he will present strategies for the management, analysis, and visualization of these types of data, and walk us through some hands-on applied examples in R along the way. One more note on the logistics for today's talk. Whenever you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, or just raise your hand or post question or comment in the chat, and we will then call on you when it is convenient and ask you to unmute your microphone and speak, or we will read out the questions for you, whichever you prefer. Once more, the disclaimer: we are recording today's session, which means that whenever you unmute your microphone, both your voice and your video will be recorded. If this happens by accident and you do not want this to be in our YouTube video upload, please shoot us an email and we'll edit it after the fact for you. So with that being said, Stefan, we are very glad to have you here today, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, and hi everyone. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen, as I think my living room is not that interesting for you. So now you should see a mountain. And next step would be to share the actual presentation. All right, here it is. Okay, once again, hello everybody, and thank you very much for coming, and also thank you very much for this invitation. I'm really glad to be here because I think the MZES Social Science Data Lab is really a great format to show some work in the social sciences, but also being a little bit geeky about using some advanced methods, and also for a change showing some code without being totally off place with that. Yeah. As Dennis already has told you, my talk will be about georeferenced survey data and the management and analysis of these data. And a very brief definition of georeferenced survey data would be that it is ordinary survey data enriched with geo-coordinates. And yeah, I will guide you to some specifics of these data, how you could use these data, and also we will have hands-on in R. So this is the code part of all these efforts. So the topics will be, I will give you a short introduction into the role of space in the social sciences. And then we'll talk, as I said, about georeferenced survey data and geospatial data and the differences between these data. Next step would be challenges or boundaries of using these data, because as you can imagine, these data, I mean, they include information about locations of server respondents, so these data are sensitive, and this being the case, it's always a little bit difficult to give you access to these data, or even access these data by researchers. And yeah, to show you that it's still worthwhile to use these data, I will introduce you to some methods of spatially linking these data to geospatial information, and show you some applications of my own. And the last part would be the promised hands-on in R, which is more or less a demo using some simulated data or simulated survey data. On the right-hand side of this topic slide, you can see that it's more or less it's an interdisciplinary endeavor to use these data. I mean, as survey researchers, we deal with survey data. So we have survey data content, information from questions in a survey, and we have some specific methods to either collect these data or also to analyze these data. But what we do when we spatially link these data to geospatial data is that we use information from other disciplines, such as engineering or environmental sciences. So we also have geospatial data content and geospatial methods. That's just a really simple Venn diagram to show you this tension of using these data. But keep that in mind when you deal with these data. All right, so space in the social sciences. So let's have a look at this more or less idealistic map from the book The City. It's from the founding fathers of the Chicago School in Sociology, Robert Park, Ernest Burgess, and Roderick Mackenzie. And it shows you, well, as I said, an idealistic map of a city with a city center and some suburbs in the outside world. But it's a publication from 1925. So as you see, it's not a topic that's necessarily new to think spatially in the social sciences. I mean, Chicago School was really about the cities, so not necessarily rural areas, but space was always a topic in this research. So it's not really new to think about space and place and also neighborhoods in the social sciences. Don't be afraid, I won't go too much into detail of the differences between space, place, and neighborhoods, because it's really there's a lot of literature on this topic as well, but it has been the topic already for a long time, and it's more or less naturally incorporated in some classic theories in the social sciences. So here's the example of Gordon Allport's Nature of Prejudice book, which is about the contact theory. So this idea that if you have contact to, for instance, immigrants in your neighborhoods, you're less likely to develop some prejudice towards these immigrants. So that's the most basic idea behind that. And it's already from 1945. And there are other flavors of social sciences, the whole area of urban studies and the regional sociology in general, that deal with space and place. This is another funny book here. It's not really funny, but it's also really interesting because it's also really classic. It was from this French political scientists who've researched soil composition and electoral turnouts. So also more or less something like a mix between the environmental social sciences and political sciences as well. But we are in the present now, and from the past to almost today. This is my general statement about the state of the art. So there's a lot of qualitative and theoretical work in the social sciences regarding space and place. These studies are often really limited, certain neighborhoods or certain cities, and they are often difficult to translate to quantitative social science research. And that's what at least what I do in my daily work. I work quantitatively. And so these qualitative studies or theoretical studies often deal with definitions of space and place and how, I don't know, something like building a bridge affects people in the neighborhood because some infrastructure is better integrated after a bridge was built. But it's often difficult to translate these specifics of some spaces and places into studies that deal with the general population. So space is often defined by data. So we often use administrative borders to operationalize neighborhoods. And another issue with quantitative studies is that neighborhoods are often considered as containers. So we use neighborhoods in order to explain some context of social behavior. But all I mean, the influence of this context on individual behavior is only happens in a specific space or a specific neighborhood, and neighborhoods often are interrelated as well, and these interrelations also affect individual people. So if you deal with neighborhoods as containers, you ignore this relationship, and this is really a bit difficult to work with. So, but we are here in the present, and it's today, not only October, but it's 2020. And a general finding is that there is, in fact, an increased amount of available data we could use in social science research today. Not only quantitatively, so these are some examples on the right-hand side of some data repositories you could use already today in order to access some geospatial information you would then could add to your survey research, survey data. So for instance, some environmental data from the European Environmental Agency is one example. Generally on the EU level, there is the Inspire initiative that helps you to get data, geospatial data for your survey data. And there are also some national initiatives such as the GDIDE, so the Spatial Data Infrastructure Germany as well. This is one development that helps you in order to work with geospatial data already today. And in difference to 20 years ago, we also have better tools nowadays. So our personal computers, also my laptop here is capable of running some more or less complicated geographic information system software, and also the data that I use that I process in the GIS system, and also standard software such as R nowadays can be used as a geographic information system. So this is a nice development. This was not possible 20 years ago with a laptop I got from my workplace here. Okay, let's step to the topic of georeferenced data. What are georeferenced data? So I already gave you a short definition. So georeferenced data are basically data with a direct spatial reference. Direct spatial reference most often are simply geocoordinates. So X and Y variables X and Y values that represent a point on Earth's surface. And this information or these geocoordinates comprise information about geometries, as you can see on the right-hand side. So these can be points, but they can also be lines or polygons, or also some grid cells or grids, raster grids projected on Earth's surface as well. So it's possible to just with the use of geocoordinates to draw these geometries. And what is optional, and what is most interesting for all of us, I think, is that these geometries also can contain information or content in relation to these geometries. So these points can be addresses of, for example, survey respondents, but they can also be, the lines can also be some roads, polygons can be some boundaries of a neighborhood, and grid cells can be for instance, land use information, green spaces in a regular grid on Earth's surface as well. And georeferenced survey data then is, well, survey data enriched with geocoordinates. We can also think about other direct spatial references, for instance, some keys for municipalities in Germany. But personally, I'd like to stick with the geocoordinates because it's a little bit more precise to talk about georeferenced data in this context. And here are some examples of already existing survey data that are georeferenced in Germany. So at GESIS, we host the German General Social Survey, the GGGS, or the ALBUS in German, where we have some information in relation to geocoordinates, at least, so some ideas that you can convert to geocoordinates. But there's also the GESIS panel, or the German longitudinal and election study at GESIS that you could use in order to spatially link them to geospatial information. And most famously, I think in Germany, is the socioeconomic panel as well. They provide access to their georeferenced data already for a long time, I think more than 10 years. And yeah, what's generally nice about georeferenced survey data, that we can then, if we link them to geospatial information, that we can analyze interactions between individual behaviors from the georeferenced data, of georeferenced survey data, and the environment. And there are some certain prerequisites that have to be met in order to actually gain or create some georeferenced data. And the most important prerequisite is geocoding. If we run a survey, usually we don't have direct access to geocoordinates. So what we have are addresses of survey respondents, and these are often called in the as a technical term, or to introduce another technical term, these are often indirect spatial references. So it's a street name, housing number, or a zip code, and a municipality name, for instance. And they have to be converted into direct spatial references, which are geocoordinates. And there are several service providers we can use in Germany in order to get this information. So you don't have to do that all on your by hand. So you don't have to search for an address on Google Maps and then extract the geocoordinates. There's already a service from Google, or also from Bing, where you can, with the use of an application programming interface, where you can then upload your addresses and get back some geocoordinates. And I mean, I will come back to this topic later, but it's a bit tricky, I guess, sometimes to work with the Google geocoder or from other service providers, because I mean, at least we could just assume that Google stores all requests, and as we are working with personal information of survey respondents, it might not be the best idea to store this information at Google. But luckily in Germany, we also have the geocoder of the Federal Agency of Cartography and Geodesy, the BKG, and they don't store requests to the service. At least at GESIS, we have licensed this service. So if you're interested to geocode some addresses, we are a good entry point in order to get access to the service. Okay, so here's my, I don't know, the difference between georeferenced survey data and geospatial data, because you could also think about georeferenced survey data simply as being geospatial data. But as I said, it's a bit tricky to work with these data, because in Germany, we are not allowed to store the geocoordinates or also addresses, so personal information of survey respondents, in one data set with the actual survey attributes. So this is a difference to actual geospatial data. Usually you have one data set comprising the information about your geometries, points, lines, or polygons, and also the information, the content information. And in light of georeferenced survey data, you're not allowed to do that. So I usually tend to make this distinction between georeferenced survey data and geospatial data. But essentially, geospatial data is georeferenced data as defined before. So it's still the information about geometries and related information. And what is really nice about geospatial data and also georeferenced data, that these data can be projected jointly in one single space. So this is what it's all about of using geospatial data or georeferenced data in general. And this allows data linking and extraction of substantial information from one data set to the other. And this is why it can serve as some information, some contextual data for survey data as well. Okay, there we already have talked about geographic information systems, and I think it's worthwhile to have more insights into the nature of these tools. So what is GIS? It's the acronym for Geographic Information System. And in our most common understanding, it's just simply some specific software or framework to process geospatial data, either to visualize these data, but also to analyze these data and also to then link these data. And what you can see here, I think it's a little bit small. It's a screenshot of the open source software, open source GIS QGIS, which is really a nice tool if you have a geospatial data set and you simply want to plot it, or you could also start some analysis with the QGIS as well. And this is just an example of an OpenStreetMap layer in the background and some green space information in Mannheim in this case as well. So it's a nice tool. It's just a small advertisement for QGIS. Later we will use R as a GIS, but this is a good starting point if you're interested to work with geospatial data more generally. Okay, data specifics. There's not only one data format in geospatial data. There are several different data formats, and there are at least two large classes of data formats. Or these are vector data. So these are usually the points, lines, and the polygons, where you can extract really on the point a geocoordinate from these lines or also polygons. So from each edge, for instance. And there are raster data or grid data. And these are really more or less some pixelated data, just like an image, where you have some more general metadata about the extent of these raster grids and so on. And another huge topic in the context of geospatial data are coordinate reference systems. These allow the projection on Earth's surface. So the X and Y variables, I mean, the most common format is longitude and latitude format, but there are several other geographic information, coordinate reference systems, sorry, that can be used that often are a little bit more precise. Sometimes depends on where you want to look at on Earth, and they differ in precision simply because they have other purposes or specific purposes. So the Mercator projection, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this projection. It's often used for traveling, and it's really nice to use this projection, but it's not really precise. For instance, on the boundaries of Earth. I mean, Earth is more or less a huge ball, but for instance, Greenland or Africa often are really distorted. So these layers, if you want to combine information from different geospatial data sets, layers, they are often called, they must match. So here's an example of this famous Mercator projection on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is a projection, the EPSG 3035. That's one code for it, which is really of use for on the level of the European Union. So that's just an illustration that sometimes if these layers don't match, it's a little bit difficult to combine these information, because then the X and Y variable refer to a whole different point on Earth's surface as well. Okay. As I mentioned, there are a lot of barriers, boundaries to use these data. And I mean, I started with that nowadays there are plenty of data sources you could use, but still the data landscape, especially in Germany regarding geospatial data, is still decentralized. So we have this federal system in Germany. So we have different statistical offices, 16, or I think it's 14 in Germany, for 16 Bundesländer. And they also provide nowadays geospatial data. geospatial information, but it's more or less fragmented. So it's often difficult to get a data set, a geospatial data set for the whole area of Germany. So it's a really fragmented data landscape in Germany. And concerning georeferenced survey data, it's often a little bit easier because we often have these population studies or population samples where we at least aim to do some inferences on the general population of Germany. But they're still primarily survey data, and it often then depends on the documentation of these data. So I have prepared some examples of data search engines. One is the GIS data search, where you can search for survey data, but it really depends then on the documentation of the survey project, whether they have defined if there are some georeference information or if there are no georeference information in the data set. And there's also this Google engine. I hope I won't get fired if I display some competitors of GIS, in this case Google, which is a huge competitor when it comes to dataset search as well. But what is funny about this is that they also use the same metadata in order to build the search engine. So it again depends on the documentation. And yeah, and lastly, it's also difficult often to access georeferenced survey data because of data protection, simply because it's often not allowed to easily share all this information with anonymized researchers in the internet. And still, I mean, we have better computers today, but there are still some technical procedures that are at least are cumbersome to use for some social scientists. One is the geocoding again. I mean, it's a reasonable automated procedure, but it also differs in quality and the access rights. So for instance, I'm not sure about the exact number, but you can only, I don't know, you can only request a certain amount of addresses to Google a day. So if you have a data set with 100,000 addresses, it's a little bit difficult. And often they differ also in quality. And yeah, again, there's this topic of data protection, or this high risk of data protection, because we usually don't want to let Google know who are our survey respondents. And still using GIS can be difficult for social scientists because I mean, it requires to exploit specialized software such as QGIS, or there are also commercial providers of these data. And a lot of operations still are complex and can get resource intensive. It depends what you aim to do. Okay. Data protection. I mean, I already said it, but it's worthwhile to have a closer look at this topic because it's one of the biggest issues when you deal with georeference survey data. This is also why I can't show you an example of real life data today. So it's really a demo of simulated data, as we will see later in the hands-on with R. And well, one of the issues is that these explicit spatial references in form of geocoordinates or addresses simply increase the risk of identifying anonymized survey respondents. And this is a risk that can not only occur during the processing of the data, so if you prepare your data for analysis, but also during the analysis. So it can be that you create some combinations of attributes or variables that are really unique. And then sometimes it's already enough to have simply the information about the municipality where a respondent lives in order to re-identify the person. So it affects all phases of research and data management. So it's also about data management today. And there are also some legal regulations we have to consider. So it's not only about this risk of re-identifying respondents. As I said, it's not allowed to store these personal information in the form of geocoordinates, for instance, in the same place as the actual survey attributes. So at least that's not allowed in Germany to do. So usually projects for instance, the GGS or also the socioeconomic panel, they store these information in separate locations. So not only on different files, but also different locations. And this information can only be matched with a correspondence table. So this is on the right-hand side. This is the process if you want to link survey data or georeferenced survey data with geospatial information. So we have. Can you see my mouse pointer? Maybe just give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. So we have a survey data set, and we have a geospatial data set, and we have this correspondence table. What you usually do, I mean, you also have your geocoordinates in reference to the survey respondents. What you usually do, you start your linking, spatial linking, it's called here, with the geospatial data. You remove or coordinate the geocoordinates. And then what you then do, you change IDs with the correspondence table, and then you can link the resulting or these intermediate data set with the actual survey data. It's not really different to what panel studies usually do when they try to, or when they aim to contact their respondents again. So they also deal with ID cores or with some correspondence tables. This is just the example when you aim to enrich your survey data with geospatial information. All right, so as I said, data may still be sensitive. So even after linking this information, deleting or coarsening geospatial information, geocoordinates, these data may still be sensitive because, I mean, what you do is basically when you add geospatial information, that you simply just add new information to your survey data. And we usually in survey projects, we do some general data privacy checks. So when we combine this information with some more or less unique information about these survey respondents. But sometimes we're still not able to openly distribute this data. And what research data centers or survey programs more generally use are so-called safe rooms or secure data centers. So at GIS it's called GIS Secure Data Center. And this is a safe space where you can, where access to this information, first of all, is controlled. So you apply for accessing these data. You state your research aim and what you aim to do with the actual data, and all of your analysis, the output of these analyses are checked, and then this information after the check is shared with you if they don't comprise any sensitive information. I mean, in times of Corona, it's a little bit more difficult. We have a huge waiting list of people who want to analyze their data. I mean, I think we are more or less in the second wave, so it might be a little bit difficult to access these data also in the next few months or next year. We don't know. But generally, this is the way to use these data. I researched before this presentation whether it's possible to play a small jingle in the background, but I wasn't sure if this is possible in Zoom. This is a commercial break. It's a project I'm also working in. It's a social spatial research data infrastructure project. It's funded by the German Research Foundation, and it's a joint project of GESIS and also the Leibniz Institute for Ecological and Urban Leibniz Institut für ökologische Raumentwicklung and the Karlsruhe Institute for Technology and the Socioeconomic Panel. And our joint interest is to make this access to this georeferenced survey data a little bit more easy, and also to this linking a little bit more easy for researchers. So we have built a prototype typical infrastructure for researchers. It's basically a web-based tool where users can start a linking project between GESIS panel data and the socioeconomic panel, and some land use information which comes from the EUR, one of the project partners. So researchers can on this platform can select survey data, can select some land use indicators, and also can select some linking methods. Some of the methods we will learn about in a couple of minutes in order to start linking, makes it a little bit more easier, because then these data doesn't have to be prepared on site in the safe room anymore. So researchers can then immediately start with analyzing their data in these safe rooms. All right. I mean, I teased it already a little bit. There are several methods or several ways of linking georeferenced survey data with geospatial data. And there are several applications, obviously, in which these methods can be used. And yeah, the more general label for these methods, at least that's the label I often use, is simply spatial linking. So the idea, again, is that you layer your geospatial data or your georeferenced data in the GIS. Here's an example of it's a map from Cologne, or one of the most beautiful districts in Cologne, the site on the right hand side of the Rhine. And on the bottom layer, there's it's a basically road map. There are district boundaries on the second layer. Then we have a land use indicator. Soil sealing is because it's the water and air tight coverage of soils. We have a layer from the German census 2011 with some immigrants information, and we have a road traffic noise layer. And the whole idea is that we project the geocoordinate of a survey respondent in the space, and then we can simply extract the information from these different layers as an additional information to the survey data. So this is the most general way of adding or spatially linking georeferenced survey data to geospatial information with this method of spatial linking. And there are several flavors of using spatial linking methods. One is the one-by-one or by location linking, where you simply just extract the information on the specific location of the housing address of a survey respondent. It's on the left-hand side here. It's an example of road traffic noise again. But one issue with these data in particular is that there are some holes in it. So we don't have information for all roads in this city district. So what we often do is that we calculate distances to the noise source of a specific decibel value in order to have an approximate measure, for instance, for road traffic noise exposure for a survey respondent. So distances are a really common way of linking geospatial information to some geocoordinates or georeferenced survey data. But there are more advanced methods as well. Some, for instance, filter methods or focal linking, where you basically use a matrix that you run over each grid cell in the data set. So what you can do here, I will have an example in a couple of minutes, so don't worry. What we do here is that we extract different information for these surrounding grid cells in comparison to the one, this inner grid cell here. So you could extract different, for instance, descriptive statistics and interrelate them. And as I said, I will have an example for this kind of filter methods in a minute. And a bit more intuitive methods are these buffer zones extractions, where you then build something like a circular area around coordinate of survey respondent, and then you extract some mean values, for instance, of soil sealing in this case, in the 500-meter circular area around the survey respondent, or 1,000-meter, in order to get more variation of the neighborhood. We'll also have an example for that in a couple of minutes. All right, so these are the methods, and now we'll turn to an actual application. One is these are all examples of my own research, obviously. And the first one is in the area of road traffic noise, marriage, and health. And the research question here was, do married people who are affected by road traffic noise report less health issues than unmarried people? This might be a strange research question for people who are not into I don't know, family research or health research, but it's really a common finding that married people are less affected by stressors or external stresses as well. So there's this whole idea of dyadic coping, so that married couples provide better dyadic coping mechanisms in their relationship. And there's also this idea of social buffering, so social ties in general help in order to reduce stress from stresses. And the stress process model. So this is the theoretical framework. So it's not too silly to ask this question, but it seems to be a little bit odd if you're not familiar with this kind of research. And what I did, I used the German General Social Survey of the year 2014, where we added road traffic noise values in decibels at the housing address of respondents. And we also used these distances as an instrumental variable in order to control some bias that occurred due to this holes in the data as well. And this theoretical framework translated in this in the data is basically a structural equation model where we have this road traffic noise, and the general idea is that road traffic noise reduces mental and physical health. So this is the most general idea. And there's also always this topic in this research about noise annoyance. People who are affected by noise, by road traffic noise, are more annoyed by noise. And this noise annoyance then leads to the reduction of mental health and physical health. So it's basically a mediation model. And what I did, I estimated a multi-group structural equation model with a group of married people and the unmarried people. And then you also have something like a moderating effect as well. And what I have found is that road traffic noise not necessarily reduces mental and physical health, only for the unmarried people. So this is in line more or less with the theory. And but what I have found also is that road traffic noise only affects noise annoyance for the married people. And then again, so it's a little bit fuzzy finding. What we see is that only noise annoyance affects the mental health and the physical health of the unmarried people. So what I'm realizing now is that I forgot to include the labels for these different SEM models. So on the right-hand side is the model for the unmarried people, on the left-hand side, the married people, obviously. We have something like a total effect that shows that road traffic noise has an health effect, but only for the unmarried people. So there's more or less a little bit gives some validation to this general theory of stresses affecting the health of unmarried people differently than married people as well. All right, second application is in the area of political attitudes. So you can see I'm really dancing on several different research fields. And the research question here is, do people who live in native homogeneous neighborhoods bordered by ethnically diverse neighborhoods tend to be more xenophobic? So it sounds a bit complicated. And the idea is that we have several theories on how the composition of neighborhoods affects prejudice towards, for instance, minorities. One of the most famous one is the contact theory I mentioned in the beginning. So contact to immigrants in the neighborhood reduces prejudice towards immigrants. And another more conflicting theory is the intergroup threat or ethnic competition theories that challenge this notion. So they introduce something like a model of competition between people in a neighborhood. So they for instance, compete about cultural domination or also economic resources in the neighborhood. And what was introduced in recent years is the halo hypothesis that provides something like a synthesis between these different theories. I'll come back to that in a minute, which is really helpful and which can be analyzed with georeferenced data. So again, I used the GGS 2014, and I linked immigrant rates of 1 square kilometer grid cells neighborhoods to these survey respondents. So again, the halo effect hypothesis, because it's a little bit difficult, so the general idea is that the contact theory and also the intergroup theory apply at the same time, more or less. So it really depends on the composition of the direct neighborhood of a person. So if I live in a ethnically homogeneous neighborhood, so this direct neighborhood here in the middle, and if I only have contact to people from surrounding neighborhoods that ethnically diverse on a more artificial level, then I'm more likely to develop prejudice towards these immigrants. It would be different if I live in an ethnically diverse neighborhood, because then I have more direct contact to immigrants, and then my prejudice would be lower. And what you can do with GIS methods is to basically construct these different halo constellations. So what you can do is you can vary the sizes of the direct neighborhood where people live and the surrounding neighborhoods. You can extract different information for the surrounding and the direct neighborhood as well. So you could use maximum values or mean values, or also municipality level values. And you can impose different relationships between the direct and surrounding neighborhood. So you, for instance, you could build in ratio, a difference, or an interaction. It's all not that important, because what we have found was joint work with Julia Klinger and Madeline Scheffer is that we basically have null effects. So this is the example of a spatial lag model. It's more elaborate spatial regression model where we have a spatially dependent lagged variable, and with the different operationalizations you could extract from this considerations. And well, we also always have null effects. We also estimated fixed effects models and some basic OLS models, and basically it's always a null effect. So yeah, working with georeferenced data sometimes it's a huge disappointment, because I mean, I started to work with data because I thought it would be nice. Now I have, I don't know, now I can operationalize the direct living environment of respondents, and my estimates or my effects will be so large, and most often it's not the case. So we often deal with really small effects and even null findings. Okay, my last application before we turn to the actual hands-on in R is in the area of environmental inequalities, still work in progress. And the research question is income associated with less environmental disadvantages, and are the differences between germ people and people with a migration background? And there's also, again, a theoretical framework in the area of social and ethnic inequalities. So the idea that people or minority people are more often live in neighborhoods that are disadvantaged, for instance, with road traffic noise, again, or pollution. And there's also this place stratification theory that refers to also discrimination on the housing market, so that people, for example, with a migration background are discriminated on the housing market and are not able, at least in certain income groups, are not able to live in neighborhoods with good neighborhood quality. And this time I used the GGS of the years 2016 and 2018, and I linked it to information about soil sealing. So again, it's the air and watertight coverage of soils, and this reduces exchange with air in a direct environment. So it also heatens up the environment. So it's really more or less an environmental burden or disadvantage. And it's also more or less an inverse indicator for green spaces. So I also linked it with green space information to corroborate this indicator. And I used 500-meter buffers to link it to the GGGS. And here are the estimates for the soil ceiling. What we see here is basically a prediction model. So we have on the x-axis income of survey respondents. On the y-axis are estimates or predictions for soil ceiling in %. And we have two separate predictions, one for migrants with the blue line and germ with the red line. And generally we find something like a decreasing slope of soil ceiling in the neighborhood with higher incomes, also for the germ respondents, but this decreases way more steeper for migrants. And it's getting a little bit fuzzy with around 4,000 euros income. But we see some gaps between migrants and Germans in this case. And these may be explained with place stratification as well. So I also had some additional analysis where I compared these slopes with some statistical tests, and it is definitely way more steeper for migrants. And here's the corroboration with green spaces as well. So it's really the inverse relationship where we have this general increase of green spaces in the neighborhood with higher incomes, but it's way steeper for migrants as well. All right, so it's 20 minutes to 3. That's, I think, perfect, at least for me, for my timing. So we're now turning to the hands-on in R. So it's also a little bit a cut in my presentation here. So if there are any questions so far, I'd be happy to already answer them. Otherwise, I would just simply start with my hands-on as well. Okay. So as I said, yeah, it's a little bit difficult and hopefully not too disappointing that I'm not able to share real-life georeferenced survey data with all of you, because I wouldn't even be able to plot geocoordinates of survey respondents. So we basically work with simulated data. At least from the side of georeferenced data. So we also will have a fake research question today. So, but this at least gives me a little bit more freedom regarding the actual research question. So I thought it would be nice to be interested in the impact of the Corona crisis on individual well-being of people, and the role of, or the mediating role of some environmental factors that may influence this relationship. And well, I planned to conduct a survey in the city of Mannheim, so it's a regionally limited study. And yeah, I mean, I think most of people in these talks are using some open source software as well, and I'm also an open source enthusiast, so we will do everything also in R, or at least almost everything, because we will switch to Python just more or less internally, but we will see that in a minute. For those of you who are not familiar with R, R is a free software environment for statistical computing and graphics as well. So it's really powerful on the graphic side, and yeah, you can basically, as it's, yeah, I mean, it's a open source platform software, so it's not only runs on Linux or Mac systems, but also Windows, for instance. So it's really platform independent, which is pretty nice. Yeah, and it's also not only a language for statistical analysis. Nowadays, at least, it also can be used as a programming language, and yeah, and the rest is history. So it has naturally, I think any programming language has some roots somewhere else, and it stems from the S programming language developed by the Bell laboratories. Difficult word. Okay. If you're not familiar with R, please don't worry. I mean, we'll see a lot of code, but you don't have to understand everything, so don't worry about it. Consider it, I don't know, something like watching some steps in the cooking show. I mean, maybe you're familiar with some cooking shows where they cut some onions ninja-like, and I don't know, maybe it's nice to look at the code, but don't worry if you do not understand any step I will show you. What I will use is piping in R. Nowadays it's people know it from the tidyverse. So there are these two schools, or at least two schools in R. It's the base R school, so everything that comes installed with R way, and there's this tidyverse which tries to make some things or some steps in R a little bit more easier. And what was often used in the tidyverse are pipes. So usually a function in R is used in this way. So you have your function call. So f is the function name. And then you have in brackets your arguments or your data objects. For instance, if you want to calculate the mean value, you just use it that way. And pipes disentangle this whole process a little bit. So you have your argument or your data object stated first, and then you use this pipe operator with the percentage sign, the greater sign, and another percentage sign, and then you have your function call. And this little dot then denotes what denotes the output or the argument from the preceding or the step that was taken on the left-hand side of this pipe operator. So you also can use pipes on more than one function. So it's really nice. I mean, usually I wouldn't use a pipe when I simply want to calculate a mean value, as in this case here. But if I have several nested arguments, it's a little bit cumbersome to read in R, in base R, because you have all these nested bracket constructions, and with pipes you just can disentangle that. So you have your, for instance, your data object, you calculate a mean value, then you apply another function and another function on the, always on the preceding output. Just small disclaimer on my coding style. Geospatial data in R, I would say nowadays it's something like a first-class citizen. I mean, there have been some packages in R for geospatial data for quite a while, for a long time actually. For example, the SP package for vector data, also the raster data that we will also use in a couple of minutes for raster data. But there are also some cutting-edge developments for vector data. And these are narrowed down to the use of the SF package, which stands for simple features. It's an implementation of an ISO standards for geospatial data in R, which makes working with geospatial data way more easier than it used to be. So simple features in the SF package. So the name refers to features, and features in data are, this is a quote from the package maintainers, is well, feature is a thought, or is thought of as a thing or an object in the real world, such a building or a tree. So all your observations in a simple feature data set are a feature. So any row is a feature. It can be a building or a tree. And so it's really similar to what we are used to at least in survey research, where we have these rectangular data matrices, where we have observations in the row and variables or attributes in the columns. And a nice feature of the simple features then is that they also include a geometry column. And this is the whole magic of the simple features. So the geometry column contains information about whether we have a point or a line or a polygon or something else expressed as a geometry as we know them from simple feature specification as well. We'll see what that all means in a couple of minutes, but it makes working with geospatial data way more easier, because these vector data formats were, or a couple of years ago, were some really complicated data objects where we had the data matrix for all the attributes, but then we had another slot in the R terms for the geometry, so it was a little bit difficult to work with. And now it's really just a flat data matrix. We will also use some other packages as well, so we're not satisfied with only using the SF package. We will also use the OSM data package, which provides a really nice interface to the Overpass API from OpenStreetMap from within R. We also use, as I said, the raster package for processing raster data, because we will use raster data. And at least internally, we will also use the reticulate package. I mean, my plan is, or we will open another GitHub repository with all the functions and all the code I will use here. I'm not sure what the dependencies of this reticulate package are, so maybe you have to install Python as well in order to use some of the function I will show you in a couple of minutes as well. Okay, so still we have our research example of the where we aim to conduct a survey in Mannheim. So our sample area are basically the Mannheim's boundaries. And here's some code where we, with which we can actually extract these boundaries as a simple feature of data frame from OpenStreetMap. So I will guide you through each line just for these boundaries. We'll also have another example for some roads or buildings in a couple of minutes, but just that you've heard about the individual steps. And then if you're familiar with using pipes in R or R in general, at least you should grasp that it's really easy actually to use these functions to process geospatial data. Okay, so the what we do is we define a new data object called Mannheim, and we will use these steps here. So we have this function from the OSM data package getBB, which basically extracts something like a bounding box for the city of Mannheim. This is just a rectangular box around the city borders, which helps GIS systems to extract extract some geospatial information for a certain area. And what we then do is start the request with the OPQ function based on this bounding box. So this bounding box gets fed in here in this function. And this is just a timeout parameter because sometimes it's a little bit tedious to work with the Overpass API because I don't know, if your request is really large, there might be a timeout, so you can extend at least the time a little bit. And what we then do is this magic add OSM feature function, where we use some of the metadata information from OSM. So if you're familiar with OSM or OpenStreetMap, I mean, it's basically geospatial data in a database, and we have several different features in there. We have information about, for example, boundaries, but also roads or buildings, and we can request this information with using a key and certain values. So the key for boundaries is admin level, and the value, at least in Germany for municipalities, then would be 6. So this is, please give me the boundaries for this bounding box, it's called. And the OSM data package also has a function to convert all these information that we requested into a simple feature. So this is the OSM data SF function. And it also comprises a lot more information, not only simple features, but also some points as well. But we were interested in the polygon, because a boundary is a polygon. So what I extract here is simply the a value or a list element called OSM multi-polygons. And then I do some really simple data wrangling where I filter out really boundaries that really are referred to the boundaries of Mannheim, because we have a bounding box. So there are some parts, I guess, of Ludwigshafen also in there. And then I also filter out all other attributes I don't need for my work. And I only extract the geometry column, and then I transfer it to the to another coordinate reference system. So this is the basic way of extracting information from the OSM And then it's, well, as I said, it's just a simple SF, a simple feature object then. And if you're familiar with ggplot for plotting in R, there's also a certain geom in order to plot this information. It's called geom_sf. So it's nowadays really easy to simply plot some maps data also in ggplot. It's one of the most common used graphics package in R nowadays. Okay, and just for fun, we will also request some information about roads in Mannheim from OSM data. So it's again really more or less the same steps. We have different keys and values because we are not any longer interested in the boundaries. We are also interested in roads. So we extract this information, and what we also do because I mean, one last important step here is sometimes you have some overlapping elements. So I was always interested on the roads that are really within the boundaries of Mannheim, but I also had some overlapping roads that went a little bit longer. So what I did here is using a function from the simple features package, st intersection, where I have cut out these, or provided a cut for these or an intersection cut for these roads as well. So, and then what is left are sometimes some ugly points at the end of the boundaries, and I only extracted lines because I was only interested in the lines. So that's what is happening here. But then again, if you're interested to plot this information, you can again simply use ggplot with the geom SF and add these roads information as another layer to our existing map as shown here. And as a last step for OpenStreetMap wise is the building is extracting information about buildings, and it's basically more or less the same. So I won't go through it again, and we can add it as another layer to the data. Okay. So really quick, as I said, we will use simulated data. So what I will do in the next step is that I will sample 1,000 geocoordinates within these boundaries of Mannheim to simulate our survey respondents' addresses. And we also add down here a random string to get something like an ID variable for these respondents. And then we can add these coordinates also to our existing plot again. And this would not have been possible with actual georeferenced survey data because I'm not allowed to plot this data. So this is another reason why we use simulated data as well. The next step, we create a correspondence table. This is something we would also do in an ordinary survey project between the IDs from the coordinate data set here. And we simply create another ID variable. So we have what you can see here, a data frame with matching or corresponding IDs. And most importantly, we conduct our own survey with some simulated data here. We gather some information about the age of respondents, so our sample data, gender, education, and income, because they might be important for a research question. And what we also do is we use something I imagined by myself, a new and highly innovative item score. It's called the fake corona burden score. It's composite scores of different items. And I used the faux package. I did a little trick here because I correlated this information with the land use information we will add in a couple of minutes. After I've shared my variables, you can have a look in the Markdown document I've used, and then you will see how I created that. So it's just that we will see some results at least. So the survey structure or survey data structure is really similar to what we are used to. We have rows and column structure and our variables we just have defined. So now we want to add some geospatial information because our hypothesis would be that the higher the amount of green spaces in the neighborhoods, the lower the fake corona burden score. Because as we know, we are all used to doing some walks nowadays, and it's way easier to do that if you have some green spaces in your area. And then maybe your mental health burden or your fake corona burden is a little bit lower if you live in a neighborhood with a lot of green spaces. And a nice data source is the ER monitor to gather this information. And we'll use a function that I have defined that accesses Python with the reticulate package. And this function can be used in order to download some layers from the ER monitor. This is something that will also be shared in the repository as well. So don't worry too much about this function. It's only that in the next step, I will use this function. So I'll load this function with the source here. And I will download a layer from there, from the ER monitor about green spaces with the help of this function here. This is a key. You have to look it up at the homepage of the ER. And the size of these raster grid cells will be 500 meters. I will use a layer from the year 2019. And then I will also crop, is it called, so cut out this layer only for the boundaries from Mannheim again. So it's basically more or less the same we did with the OSM data. And yeah, again, we can simply plot these data again in ggplot. I mean, what I did here, I wouldn't recommend to do that with large raster data sets because I converted it to an actual vector data set, but it's easy because it's easier to plot it. I wouldn't recommend to do that when you have a raster data set for the whole area of Germany as well. All right, and as a more or less last step in our data wrangling process is that we want to add this information to the geocoordinates of the server respondent. So we want to conduct some spatial linking. So we want to add the information for each coordinate to the coordinate. And this can be done with using a function from the raster package, raster extract it's the name. And we just simply can add it as a new a column to a data set with some tidyverse functions. So there in tidyverse, you could use the mutate function to simply add new columns to your existing data. And this is done here. So we have the mutate function, and then we define a new variable called green. And we use this raster, this extract function from the raster package to add these raster values to the geocoordinates. It's really that simple. Then your data simply looks like that. You have your geometry column, your ID variable, and a new column with the green values, the green space values in the neighborhood. And yeah, then we want to change IDs. We want to remove coordinates from these data because our final aim is to add this information to the survey data. This is done here. So we do a simple join between the correspondence table and the data we have just linked to the coordinates, and delete the coordinate referring variable as shown here. And then we have a simple data set with ID variables that match those of the survey data and the green space values that we want to add to the survey data. And this is what we do then do more or less here. So we conduct another join with the fake survey data and this intermediate data set that comprise the IDs of the survey data and the green space indicator, and we link them by ID. And then we have our survey data set with the green space values here. So it's really that simple. And then, I don't know, we can analyze these data, could use some elaborated models for analyzing these data. In this case, I have simply run a OLS regression model here with the fake corona burden score as a dependent variable with all our control variables, and then we have this green space indicator here. And in contrast to showing you a regression table, I simply used the function from the SGplot package to plot the predictions of the green space indicator or the fake corona burden score on the green space indicators, and then we can see there's really a nice decreasing slope between green spaces and the fake corona burden score. So people who live in areas with high levels of green spaces do have lower fake corona burden scores. Okay, I'm realizing I'm running a little bit of time. I have prepared some visualization features, but I also can suggest maybe I just stop here because we are also planning to write something like a blog post for what I'm doing in a couple of next minutes, because I don't know, I can imagine there are some questions. So yeah, I propose to simply stop here and maybe open the floor for some questions.
So thanks, Stefan. This was great, and thanks so much for coming up with a Mannheim-specific example. This has been great. We have one question so far from the audience, namely, if you extract green spaces the way you did, what happens to blue spaces, so areas of water? Are these counted as green spaces or as something different?
That's a good question. I mean, I have used rather, it's not really, that's a really low resolution, but it's 500 meters. There are also indicators for 100 meters, 100 times 100 meters rasters. I mean, these information stem from several other resources. I think the green spaces indicators are from satellite imaging. And they it's an image processing, image detection algorithm that detects green spaces. There are, I mean, I think in this indicator I have used, it's an urban type of green spaces that includes information about parks, graveyards as well, and usually in this indicator, yeah, water is added as a green space as well. Because the idea is that water is something like an open area. It's also, it has some similar effects as green spaces on people. There's also literature on blue spaces, and they are often compared. Yeah, and I think in this case, to make it short, yeah, water is also considered as green spaces as well. Yeah.
Right, thank you. There's another question on the technical terms that you mentioned. Namely, you talked about spatial linking and converting indirect spatial references into direct spatial references. Mm-hmm. So are these the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, technically you can think about them in a similar way. I mean, what you do actually with, or most of the algorithms to convert addresses and geocoordinates are some fuzzy matching algorithms. So I don't know, you have your address database, and then you have a database with addresses and geocoordinates. And what you do is then do some fuzzy matching between these different address information in order to add the geocoordinates to your original survey, original address database. But some of the services provide some interfaces that are similar to some geospatial or web services for geospatial data. So for instance, if you use the geocoding service of the Federal Agency of Cartography and Geodesy, it's a web feature service. And this is basically something like a web service for geospatial data. So it's really similar because, I mean, you have data you want to project in space, and you want to add information from space to your existing data. So it's really similar. But what I usually mean when I use spatial linking is I have pre-existing data with direct spatial references, and I add some information from one data set to the other. So it's, at least in my understanding, it's not necessarily the same. So it's different. This is why geocoding is a prerequisite and not necessarily the actual step of spatial linking. Something like a data preparation step as well. but in all details and technically, it's a similar approach. But it makes sense to provide some differentiation between them.
All right, thank you. Then there's a follow-up question to the previous one on blue spaces. Namely, Gracia, who asked this question, would be interested in what could or should be done if interested in something that can't be in waters. So she works with things that are on streets and is interested in how many streets are around some home location. So what should she do if someone was living on a peninsula, for example?
So can you repeat the last?
So if somebody lived on a peninsula, so a small geographical area surrounded by water.
I mean, it depends on the data sources. I mean, the nice thing about the data I have used, it's only one indicator of a huge database. And there are, in fact, also indicators for traffic or road densities as well. So this might be interesting in order to also get some ideas about densities of roads around a house. But what you could also think about is to combine this information. So one idea would be to use the actual, because there's also an indicator for waterways as well. So you could just cut out, with the use of these waterways, you could just cut out this information from the green space indicator provided earlier. Does it answer the question? Because, I mean, it's really, yeah, using geospatial data, I mean, maybe that's a perfect example. It really invites you to be creative about mixing different data sets and combining them in order to get something that you really want to have in the end. And this is a nice feature of having at least everything more or less in the form of a geometry, because then you can use geometric operations.
All right, so I don't see a follow-up. So while we wait for additional questions from the audience, here's one question that I would like to ask you. Because as you know, the Mannheim Center for European Social Research is an agglomeration of research projects where many people also collect original survey data. And I don't know how much insight you have there, but let's say they are under contract for a survey with, I don't know, Respondi, YouGov, or another provider, and they are interested in some form of geocoding. So maybe not the coordinates, but at least, let's say, the municipality or the postcode area in which an individual lives. Do you know what the legal regulations are and what kind of precautions need to be taken when collecting these data as part of an original data collection effort?
I mean, one of the most important prerequisites to do all this stuff is something like having an informed consent of survey respondents. So if your letter to the survey respondents, if it's a mail survey, includes some statements about data protections and how these data are processed, and then there's this famous sentence that all data will be deleted after the project is ended. You basically have no choice. You have to delete your data, and then you can not use this information. I mean, there was some change with these new data protection legislation on the European level. So survey programs do have to be more open and more transparent nowadays than they maybe have used to be in the past. But yeah, I mean, if you want to, for example, geocode addresses or add regional information, at least in some ways you should mention it in the letter to the respondents. Yeah, and then I mean, you still have to do everything in light of the data protection legislation. So this whole separation of survey data and personal information still is very important. I mean, if you have information, this is not maybe on the address level, this is not that strict, but these rules still apply. So yeah.
All right, thank you very much. We have another question from the audience. So Rüdiger Schmidt-Beck asks, you said that there are many sources of geodata. So is there something like a catalog for these sources? And what is a good strategy to get an idea of what kind of data are out there and how to get them?
I wish there were there was a catalog. I mean, there are. I mean, a good choice. I mean, it depends if you're interested in publicly available data or commercial data. But if you're interested in these open governmental data, there are data portals where you can search for geospatial data. So, for example, OpenGov data portal is one address, or also this GDI.de I have mentioned before. But one issue with geospatial data is that, as I said in the beginning, it stems from different disciplines. So the data or the methods behind the data are probably the same across different disciplines, but the content is different. So environmental data is different to data from sociodemographic data. For example, the German census 2011 is also available as geospatial data, but it's really different to these road traffic noise data. So they are not part of the same database, unfortunately. I mean, I did some research, but we also published a little bit about it. We had a working paper a couple of years ago, but yeah, I'm afraid it's already outdated today. Yeah, so that's one issue. This Inspire Inspire initiative on the European level that I have mentioned earlier is some way of providing this information on the European level, because it provides something like a harmonized metadata structure for different data providers within each member state. Yeah, I mean, last time I looked it up, it was not that comprehensive, but maybe this changes in the coming years, because the operational phase just started, I guess, this year or last year. But yeah, unfortunately, to make it short, it's not that easy to do to access something like a comprehensive database of geospatial information. And yeah, this being said, there's also a whole data landscape from commercial data suppliers as well. And yeah.
All right, thank you very much. There's one more question from Sven Lenkewitz, sorry, who asks whether you could provide some seminal papers or generally good papers that use georeferenced data, whether there are any seminal or prominent examples.
Georeferenced data or georeferenced survey data? So it's sometimes
survey data, georeferenced survey data.
I mean, I have some, I mean, sorry, maybe I can switch back to my presentation here, because I have a reference list. So this is all part of the blog post, hopefully. I mean, I have some references here. I think some good papers for the whole for modern research in this area would be all this literature on the halo effect, for example. So not only our own publication, there will be other publications as well in the future, but maybe those from the UK. Boyer 2008, it's already some couple of years old, which is pretty nice to also have something like a theoretical integration of this whole research area. That would be nice. Yeah, I mean, there's always my dissertation down here in bold, but it's more or less an overview publication, and granted, it's not really a research paper, and don't want to say it's seminal as well. But yeah, maybe I have to think about it if there's something I would the first choice paper, but that's a little bit mean to nominate the first choice paper on georeferenced survey data, other than stuff that I didn't do myself.
All right, thank you. There's a follow-up question by Rüdiger Schmidt-Beck. So if one is interested in data of a level of granularity that allows for a study of a city like Mannheim, would the common data sources usually have material at this fine-grained level, or are most of the data that's out there too crude for that level of analysis? So specifically, if one wants to analyze within city variation.
I'm not sure about Mannheim, honestly. So I just have chosen this example because of this talk. I mean, several cities. I'm thinking about the city of Cologne because I'm from Cologne. At least I work in Cologne, I live in Cologne. And there's the whole geodata portal of the city of Cologne that really provides small scale spatial data for the city of Cologne. So we also have, for example, all the election results for all the different, I don't know what's the name in English, Stimmbezirke of Cologne in there, and these are a couple of hundreds. So it's you can then analyze within city variance variation with these data. I'd recommend to just look it up. And maybe the city of Mannheim has a web page on this information. Another good address might be also this OpenGov data portal. Maybe Mannheim also has uploaded some geospatial information, but I mean, it's not only a theoretical question whether you're able to use this information to study within city variation, but it really depends, I guess, on the city. If you're really interested in Mannheim, I guess it's at least a city with a certain size, or with a sufficient size that there are at least enough data to be gathered to study these effects as well.
All right, great, thank you. We're nearing the end of time, but there's one more question that I would like to ask because I know it's an issue that bothers a lot of political scientists. And it's about partly overlapping geographies. So oftentimes we have information across different subnational geographies, for example, the postal geographies, census geographies, administrative geographies, and electoral geographies, which in countries may or may not overlap. And with shapefiles, it's obviously fairly easy to establish what the percentage of overlap is, but that does obviously not imply that the percentage of geographical or areal overlap represents the composition of the respective population. So in other words, if I know that a certain postcode area, or that 50% of a certain postcode area are within a certain electoral district, that doesn't mean that 50% of the population of this postcode area live in this 50% of area that are within this electoral district. So are there any best practices for combining data at different measured at different levels of geographies such that they can be aggregated at the level of one particular geography that's of interest?
Honestly, I'm not aware of too many best practices in that regard. I mean, yeah, I know these examples. It's always difficulty. Yeah, for example, with zip codes that they are not necessarily part of the same municipality. Or another issue would be these census grid cells. As you have seen with the immigrant rates that also overlap with boundaries. And it's even trickier when you use these geographic or these geometries in order to link their information to some geocoordinates of a server respondents, because you're never sure whether a respondent lives really in the center of this geometry or somewhere else in the boundaries. Maybe we have to ask some geographers if they have some smart algorithms to track that. I mean, it's at least a smart approach to calculate these percentages of overlap, for example, but I'm not sure. Yeah. I mean, it's something I'm currently working on, to be honest, because we have some mismatches between some old georeferenced data and some newer ones, and where also with the example of zip codes and municipalities. Yeah, maybe we should talk in a couple of weeks or a month, and we can post an update on YouTube or somewhere else. But I think maybe would be helpful at least to estimate the bias that's introduced with that. But that would maybe already help. But some best practices, I'm not sure. Maybe ask the geographers or geoscientists. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We're over time now, so I suggest we call it a day. Stefan, thank you very, very much for the great presentation and the insightful answers to the questions in the Q&A. And thanks to our audience for being here today. The Social Science Data Lab will be back in 2 weeks on November 4th with Marcel Neuenhofer from the University of Mannheim, who will give an input talk on generative adversarial nets for social scientists. That being said, goodbye everyone and have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Bye.